Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Nau mai, haere mai ki tēnei hui I tēnei ata, na mihi mahana ki a koutou katoa I huri no I tēnei motu I tēnei ata. Ki te tīmata tēnei hui me karakia tātou. Tuia te rangi, tuia te papa, tuia ngā kōrero, tuia ngā wānanga. Kia mau, kia ita, kia kuru pounamu te rongo, mo te oranga o ngā mokopuna. Honi e, hui e, ka ki e. Welcome everyone to this hui this morning, this webinar focusing on our most recent Mokopuna Voices report, a place to talk peacefully, what helps and what gets in the way, Mokopuna Voices on healing from family and sexual violence in Aotearoa New Zealand. Shortly, we will introduce ourselves and get into the discussion, but before we begin, just a couple of quick notices up front. I want to mention a content warning for our conversation this morning, acknowledging the sensitive nature of the discussion that we will be having, which does focus on violence, abuse and trauma experienced by Mokopuna and whānau around our country. And I encourage everyone who is joining this conversation today, or maybe watching the recording later, to do whatever you need to do to protect your wairua, your well-being while we go through the conversation.
And I'd just like to add that as we go through our session this morning, that we want to really promote respectful and engaging conversation, particularly through our questions and answers, but just making sure that we're mindful and respectful of all audience members in that participation. I also wanted to just let you know, before we crack into things, that the session will be recorded, as Claire outlined, and we're going to be sharing an online version post the event. So for any of your colleagues or others who can't attend, please share the link and encourage people to watch the webinar at their own leisure. In terms of some of the logistics, we will have our chat function open. We do have some moderation around that just to help us when it comes time to be answering questions and helping with the flow of information. And we've got two fabulous moderators, Andy and Hannah, and they'll be supporting us throughout. Really encourage you to check out the link to the report that's going to be shared in the chat. So if that's something you'd like to peruse now or a bit later on post our webinar session.
I want to, on behalf of Emma and myself, before we introduce ourselves, just really thank you for taking the time to join this webinar today. It is really great that we have so many people joining from around the motu and across so many different spaces, both working in our communities, walking alongside Mokopuna and whānau, and communities and hapori around the motu in our NGO space, kaupapa Māori, social services space, as well as working across government and many of the agencies that are important for making that systemic change on some of this kaupapa that we will be discussing today. So ka nui te mihi ki a koutou katoa, and like Emma said, encourage everyone to be involved in the discussion. We're going to dedicate about 15 to 20 minutes at the end of this discussion to your Q&A, your partai and discussion. So do share those in the chat throughout the session, and we will get to as many of those as we can this morning. Before we go any further, I think we should introduce ourselves. So Hannah, do you want to kick off?
Thank you. Well, kia ora koutou, ko Emma Powell toku ingoa. I am the Chief Executive at Puna Aonui. We are the joint venture for the elimination of family violence and sexual violence. And I hold the formidable role across government of really looking to tie together a number of our core agencies in the pursuit of elimination of family violence and sexual violence. So a lot of collaboration and a lot of working as a collective. So it's really awesome to be here in partnership with Mana Mokopuna and to have been really supporting this work in the report as it's tracked its way to this wonderful place where we're sharing it with everyone today.
Kia ora, Emma. It is great to be alongside you today. Kia ora koutou anō, ko Claire Achmad tōku ingoa, ko ahau te kaikomihana matua mōna tamariki. I'm Claire, I'm the Chief Children's Commissioner, and I lead Mana Mokopuna Children and Young People's Commission. We are the independent advocate working every day for and with children and young people. So that's all Mokopuna around the motu. That includes all children and young people under the age of 18, and also children and young young people up to the age of 25 who are in care or custody or have been in care or custody in our country. And our primary role is really to advocate independently for the rights and the well-being and the positive outcomes of Mokopuna, to support their participation in matters that affect them, for example, this particular kaupapa that we are discussing today. And so in terms of today's discussion, we really are going to be focusing on amplifying the Mokopuna voices that are in this report here. And I encourage you to read it if you haven't already. It is available for everyone. The focus of this piece of work, which we are really pleased to have undertaken in collaboration with Te Puna Aonui to help to inform the work of Te Aorere Kura, including the new action plan under Te Aorere Kura. The focus of this piece of work was to hear directly from Mokopuna who have lived experience of family and or sexual violence, and to understand directly from them and also from whānau and from the communities around them what works and what gets in the way and what needs to change when it comes to the healing of Mokopuna from family and or sexual violence. And the report itself presents a number of actionable steps for change. And today we really want to focus in on those things, the solutions that Mokopuna themselves have brought forward, and then that are influencing and that have played forward into the second Te Aorere Kura action plan. So just to highlight, I guess, the work that went into this report to give you a brief background. As I said, our two agencies have been in collaboration for, well over a year now on this work. And we worked, our team from Mana Mokopuna went out around the motu to connect with a range of organisations that walk alongside Mokopuna in healing from family or sexual violence. And our team engaged in direct interviews and conversations with 41 Mokopuna in 6 different regions around the motu, with 24 whānau members. About half of those were connected with the Mokopuna who we spoke with, and half were from other whānau, and then also 46 kaimahi who work in these spaces. And the report that you have, that we have in front of us, that the poster is on the wall behind us and that you can access online on our website, it focuses on bringing forward the direct, unfiltered views of Mokopuna, first and foremost, and also of whānau. And a little bit down the track, we will be publishing another document that brings forward the views of kaimahi that have been shared with us through this work. So today's conversation, we are going to really focus on some of the core themes that come through from Mokopuna in A Place to Talk Peacefully. There were 9 key themes that came through from Mokopuna. Because of our time today, we're not going to get to cover them all, but we are going to highlight a number of these themes. And as we go through, Emma and I will tag team on the kōrero today. We will highlight these different themes as we go through. We will ground and anchor those in quotes from Mokopuna, and you'll get a sense of what they have told us and then how that is relating to the work that's happening under Te Aorere Kura. So shall we get into it?
Sounds great.
All right, great. Well, everyone, the first theme that comes through really prominently from Mokopuna is that of safety. And the first quote that I want to share to anchor our conversation is from a Mokopuna who told us, like just being comfortable, like just being able to be who you are, being in a judgment-free environment. And so what we see in this report is Mokopuna have really emphasised the criticality of physical and emotional safety to underpin at a really fundamental level their process of healing from family and or sexual violence. Alongside this, they really highlight strongly the importance of stable housing and really nurturing environments that nourish their holistic well-being, I guess, all sides of their te whare tapaka. A quote that I want to bring forward as well from a Mokopuna is what one of them shared around, and they said, I wish I could say giving young people their home quick so they have their own space. It's the violence, not their fault. And so one of these key solutions and calls to action that we see Mokopuna bringing forward in this report is for Aotearoa New Zealand to do more to address housing instability, to make sure that there is more secure, really youth-focused housing, because we see that when young people experience family and or sexual violence, often that is really interconnected with insecure and unstable housing situations. And alongside that, they talk really strongly about the need to develop child and youth-friendly spaces throughout our communities.
Yeah, and that safety and security is just paramount for all of us. And when you think about that ability to then engage in developmental activities, a way to thrive and to be in social situations, knowing that you have a safe space and place to be is the anchor point for all of that great development. When it comes to the system at large and how we provide for those safe spaces, I think that the underlying determinant and driver around housing is a really critical facet. It's a big part of what can exacerbate or be a difference and a game changer when it comes to whānau's experiences, and particularly for children and young people. As we go forward, I sort of always look at things in two ways. One is at a very system level. What can central government be doing to join up and come together around some of these issues? To date, our housing colleagues have not been part of our joint venture, but that doesn't mean that we don't reach across and start to make those connections. And I know in particular our Minister, the Honourable Karen Chor, is actually very, very focused on reaching up and out from her core set of agencies that she's helping to oversee to really start to bring in and look at partnerships around housing. So at that system level, we do have quite a lot of commitment and intention to start to bring those two pieces together. I think it's been the gap. I need to call that out, and I think it's something that we can do much better at that system level. But when it comes to really looking at the support, the infrastructure, and the ways of working, we have to get local. We must get down, right down to community level to start to say, in a given place, what are the assets? What are the things that we've got that can really support and stabilise, and sort of talk about that infrastructure, that architecture that's going to support well-being and new ways of being and doing. And so we are focusing over the coming years, the next 2 years in particular, with a real focus in 12 key localities. Now, that's about bringing multiple agencies together to look at what those responses need to be. And absolutely housing and linkages, not just in terms of what government officials might be doing, but what are providers and other NGOs and other supports that are on the ground? How do we start to join those up? So, as I say, sort of thinking about it at that top level, but absolutely in those localities, when we're thinking about multi-agency, we have to be thinking about housing support as well.
That's great to hear, Emma, around the multi-level that you think about this and approach this from. And I think what comes through clearly from the Mokopuna in this report certainly is that they want that multi-level change.
Yeah.
And we'll see that a bit more as we shift through some of the various things that we're going to discuss today. And I guess in terms of, you mentioned about housing colleagues having not been at that Te Puna Aonui table, I guess that's when my role and our role as the independent advocate can come in to keep amplifying some of these really big
Absolutely.
housing to be key.
Yes. And I'd also, too, audience participation and all of that. Have a think in your space that you're occupying right now. what are those linkages? I want to hear about that, and how can we be bringing that to the fore? And so how could we be starting to stitch this together better in your world, the one that you might be part of? I know we've got a real range of folks watching today. What could you bring? And again, how can you share some of those insights through to myself and through to Puna Aonui so that we can action that in terms of understanding those real systemic barriers that are getting in the way?
Yeah. Yeah, Emma, I really wanted to talk about what you just said and acknowledge the incredible depth of expertise that we have joining us on this webinar today, acknowledging the incredible mahi that is being done in so many communities in Hapori and across our public sector in this space, and that it really does take collective action, and us working from all our different roles and angles, I guess, to make that change together. So the second theme that came through from Mokopuna in A Place to Talk Peacefully is healing for the whole whānau. And here I ground us with a quote from a Mokopuna who shares, "Feeling good to me is just being with my mum in a good home and no negative energies around." And then another Mokopuna shared with us about this is reflecting on their support worker. And this Mokopuna says, well, she wasn't just there for me. She was there for my mum and my brothers as well, helping us all get along and talking to my mum and all of that to try and help improve the home life. And so what comes through from Mokopuna really clearly in this project where we've heard from them is the critical role of family and of whānau in Mokopuna lives. And Mokopuna told us that being in their whānau is so important to them in helping them to feel good and to feel safe. And they discussed with us the need for support to heal from family and or sexual violence, to not only focus on them and their healing, but to focus on whole of whānau healing initiatives, also whānau-led healing initiatives, and that the difference that wraparound support can make.
Absolutely. And, you know, for too long, we have sought to split services. So where there are services available, quite often they are fragmented. And I know a lot of practitioners tend to just do the workaround so that they can actually work with whole of whānau solutions and the real kind of whatever it takes model. And quite often there are a lot of hacks that are happening to really ensure that those services can be provided in that holistic wraparound way. What we must do is to ensure that our commissioning and the way that we are creating the service design, how the funding is distributed, and how we open up and allow for that flex, that we are catching up, right? So that we are following where whānau and Mokopuna are saying, this is what works for us. We need to be able to build from that place back into the sorts of services. And I would sort of say bundles of things that people might need at any given time. The action plan sets out in its very first and key focus area. And, you know, I would say this is probably one of our biggest areas for change, is understanding our investment. Where are we going to fund for those sorts of realities and for greater impact and outcomes? But also, you know, how are we setting up the services and the commissioning to ensure that we are, you know, commissioning for those outcomes. So we're setting out what great looks like. Now, often that's not up for us to decide either. We can hear and see through a report like this just what matters and what makes a difference. So how are we starting to really ground down in that sort of design that does enable those things to happen? And so I'm really excited actually about how this part of our action plan over the next 5 years is going to ideally take us where we need to go in that regard. And again, there will be, but we need to stop being so prescriptive. If we can create clarity of the outcome, but really leave it up to providers and whānau to work together on what works and to back them and to back that approach, then I think we can start to see a real shift in outcome. we're going to get started looking at in terms of those multi-agency responses, how are we working together locally? That's the first place where we're going to really start to say, how could we do this differently in terms of how those services might be sort of commissioned for and pulled together. I think too, when we're looking at that holistic support, it also, what people are asking for is not huge at times. There are some very simple things that if we can just get right and enable, and a lot of that comes down to exactly as you quoted. The support worker was there for me and my mum, and we talked and felt like someone was in our corner. So much of that too is about how our workforces are showing up and the care and empathy, which I know they come with, but it's like, how do we free them up to do that role? How do we deal with all the back office stuff so that our care workers, support workers and other providers are actually out front doing what they do best? That's going to be a real thing for me, I think, as we continue through this, is we've got to take care of the back end so that we can really be so much more, I think, therapeutic and healing by nature in the work that we're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, and just bouncing off that, interestingly, something that comes through really strongly in the report from Mokopuna is that they recognise the resource that's needed to actually enable that work to happen.
Yeah.
And so part of, I guess, the systemic change that Mokopuna are calling out for is, hey, government, make sure that these things are invested in appropriately, resourced strongly, so that we can actually see, our support workers doing what they do best, showing up for us and working alongside us.
That's right. And, I just wanted to add as well, when it comes to our multi-agency responses locally, we have tended also to look at safety plans that really do primarily focus around a victim survivor, which is absolutely front and centre and correct. I don't know how well we've been thinking about the wider whānau in that safety planning. There will be difference across the country. And so with part of our push into the second action plan, we are looking to bring all of the needs of people together into sort of one set of plans and working to support, okay, so what does it take to stitch that together as well? So that's a change in focus. And I think, as I say, we're looking to roll that out across different localities in the first year or two. That's where we're going to start to see what works and what doesn't work and learn from that. Yeah.
Shoot.
The next theme that Mokopuna bring forward to us in this report is the importance of supportive people and effective communication. And so I guess going back to what you were saying just then, anyway, some of this is really about getting the very basics right. And that when those things are right and tika, then that is something that really does practically help Mokopuna on their journey of healing. So the quote that I want to anchor us in here, it comes from a Mokopuna, and they shared with us, reaching out to people and then those people listening to you. I was brought up with these three forms of communication: talking, listening, and acting. And so here in this part of the report, what we see is Mokopuna highlighting that their healing from family and or sexual violence is so predicated on trusting relationships. It is relational, and it is about that collective, holistic care that wraps around them. Also, the crucial nature of relationships being based on real trust, on reliability from those who are providing them with support, and that they feel they are genuinely being listened to, genuinely, that deep listening that we often talk about. That's really what comes through from Mokopuna. And another Mokopuna, they shared with us this quote: when they actually listen and actually go do what they're going to say and do it not 2 months later. And so that reliability that follows through. We heard from so many of these mokopuna, sadly, that they had been let down from time to time on their healing journey, but the times where there was that genuine follow through, where it was responsive, again, it goes to resourcing and, systems enabling this work to happen. Those are the things that Mokopuna told us work and that are so important. And they also said talked about the importance of being kept up to date by the services that they're being supported by, and also not being made to retell their story over and over again, because they shared with us that can be re-traumatizing, and that there needs to be real discretion and respect for privacy and treating what is very sensitive information and life experiences in pūrākau in confidence, treating it as the taonga that it is. And so this mokopuna, and this is the last quote I'll share in this theme before handing over to you, Emma. This mokopuna shares, "I'd hear a lot of false promises, if you know what I mean. And I think social workers definitely shouldn't make a promise unless they can, keep that promise. Because as a kid, the only thing you really have is what you're told by adults. Because when you're young, you really, really trust adults."
Really powerful, isn't it? There's so much. This is just the power of a report like this and bringing to life into the forefront these voices that on the face of it, so simple, not simplistic, but simple and powerful. And I think sometimes, I just want to take a moment to say, if we were to just anchor on some of these statements and these voices, we could clear away all of the complexity at times, and can kind of clean slate it a little and think about how we need to go forward. We've seen through, and particular shout out now to Women's Refuge, who have piloted with MSD child advocates in refuge, and we're really pleased to see that as an ongoing action in our action plan. If people haven't accessed, there's a fabulous evaluation of that pilot, and you just see that experiential opening of children and young people who have someone in their corner, who is walking alongside and not walking away. And that's what happens when you resource and you put the capability in and you stick with it. And so, how can we in other spaces be freeing up our front line who want to operate in those ways, who want to do what they say, and how are we doing that so that we can free people up, as I said before, to truly work in very therapeutic in therapeutic ways. The other thing, that's being talked about here is just the preciousness of that information. And that is a challenge throughout, is that retelling of stories, needing to, okay, so who have we got this week, and who am I talking to, and now we have to go back through that again. And, so we have a real concerted effort over the next 2 years, particularly, to start to build what is an information sharing platform where all of our major agencies are able to share information safely and with all of the right intention to help support local planning and interventions and supports. That is without its challenges, of course, not without its challenges, of course, and sort of starting to bring that together so that we have information, we can use that to our best advantage to be intervening well, and we're not needing to go back through and retell, re-ask all the time. And, the call out here is that we treat that information with utmost care and consent. And so those are all issues that we're working through right now to understand how do we do what's right when it comes to information sharing? How do we equip the frontline and our agencies and NGOs to have the right information so that they can do the problem solving, so that they can do the intervention, and not just spend a huge amount of time just sharing the information in the first place. And so we really wanted to make that more easeful for people.
It also,
you know, it doesn't, and just that finally, that piece about keeping people informed, the ability to create those feedback loops and being able to just keep connected in safe ways and in different ways is going to be really, really key. So, you know, just encouraging again, people who are working together collectively on the ground, how can we be creating those feedback loops? So often we have whānau who come into our services and then they've gone again, and we don't have that connection point back, and we lose people, and then they resurface again, unfortunately, when something negative has happened for them. And so how are we keeping whānau engaged in our services for the long haul?
Indeed. And I think that comes back to that point of trust as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And ongoing engagement for the whole whānau.
Yeah.
Turning now to the next thing that we want to highlight from Mokopuna. This is supportive services and youth-friendly spaces and activities. And one Mokopuna told us, speaking about a space where they felt comfortable in, and this, I quote, people would hang out, they'd encourage you, they'd be like, come into the kitchen, let's play a game, let's cook together. Like you'd have these like mentors. It was like a home, and it had activities, and I felt safe in that place. So here we have seen and heard from Mokopuna in this part of the report the importance of having those safe, supportive, effective services that really are Mokopuna centred and focused. And that goes for counselling. It's about that practical help, and it's also about that social work and mental health support. And here again, we see Mokopuna reinforcing the importance of consistency, of accessibility, and just that sense of being welcome in a space, and that they can actually just be them. This Mokopuna shared, and I quote again, I can get stuff off my chest, and then my counsellor, they like talk me through it and give me and my mum ideas of stuff. And Mokopuna have also highlighted the importance of self-advocacy and self-empowerment, and the importance of being able to participate and to have their voice truly listened to, truly valued, respected, and upheld. This Mokopuna, they shared with us, every tamariki has a voice, ka pai. And then another Mokopuna says, the important thing to me was that I spoke up and I asked for help, and like I reached out, and that opened so many opportunities for me. Now I'm in university and I own a car, I do counselling.
Pretty remarkable. What I sit with when I hear that is we have to challenge ourselves to redefine services. What's being described is not a traditional 1 hour a week sort of, and I know that's can be quite a narrow view, but we have to create a different definition of what works, and we need to try and test some different ways of being and doing. And you know, that is my vision for the work under the action plan, and particularly under the investing and commissioning. We are looking to better understand and evaluate what makes the difference. And I think being brave enough to try some things and let them run, and to start to be more flexible in how those services are provided. The thing is too that we might create a set of criteria or thresholds about who can receive what when. Normally has to happen within a particular time frame, and we need to be able to measure sort of pre and post, and that's sort of our very, very westernized sort of view of the world when it comes to service provision. And I think that there is an opportunity here to start to, as I said before, what are the sorts of outcomes we're wanting to achieve? What are young people telling us they need at particular points of time? It's not a linear thing.
That's right.
You think you've got them, but then, you know, things will always change. And so we need to be able to adapt our approaches to that. I think we can start to unbundle how things are achieved, but we must work across agencies, and we must start to put our services together on the table and start to say, how are we going to do this differently? And I mean it when I say that is what the urgency and the impetus is behind this, real look at how we are investing and commissioning into services. And there's an opportunity to really shape that quite differently. And there's a wonderful set of guide rails already right here. And yeah.
Just wanting to flag that we have 2 more themes that we will be focusing on. And so if you do have any partai, any questions that you'd like to pop into the chat, please do start to do that if you'd like to, because the last sort of 15 minutes of this kōrero will be focused on engaging in some Q&A.
I'm just going to take a technical moment and encourage Andy to plug my laptop in. So
the next theme that we want to highlight that Mokopuna have brought forward in this report and in this project is the importance of cultural support and responsiveness. And so one Mokopuna Māori shared with us, and I quote, "I think getting help means mahuru te atu wairoa. You go find wisdom, mātauranga, kōrero. I think that means like karakia, waiata, anything mātauranga Māori is basically Māori wisdom." So a lot of the Mokopuna who our team had the privilege of being in conversation with for this project were Mokopuna Māori. We did hear from a diverse range of Mokopuna across our communities, including Pacific Mokopuna, Mokopuna Whaikaha, Rainbow Mokopuna and resettled Mokopuna. But in terms of what we heard from Mokopuna Māori, their perspectives came through really strongly in terms of the need for culturally grounded solutions in te ao Māori mātauranga and healing. They also discussed with us the strong importance, and this came through as well from the Pacific Mokopuna who we heard from, about having diverse and culturally competent kaimahi and support people who are able to walk alongside them, that they can see themselves in and who they feel really, really well understood by. And so I think there's quite a bit that comes through in the calls to action in this report in this regard, around the need to ensure we focus on continuing to enhance cultural capability and cultural responsiveness, and ensuring that equitable investment in services that are going to meet the needs and uphold the rights of Māori, of whānau Māori, of Pacific families and whānau as well. And I think it connects into that importance of continuing to not take our eye off building that diverse
It's absolutely
about it.
Yeah, for sure. And absolutely. And you cannot ever talk about service without our workforce. And we need to ensure that those 2 things are being looked at and considered and nurtured in equal measure. If there's no workforce, there's no service. And if there isn't a culturally competent and diverse workforce who can really meet the needs of the people we are here to serve, then we don't have outcomes. And so it all is very much wedded all together. We have continued in the next action plan a real focus around workforce capability development. It is a core plank of Te Aurere Kura and absolutely has to be. It runs through everything we do. We are continuing to build the expansion and uptake around our workforce capability frameworks, which are grounded in cultural competency in particular principles. And as well as looking at ways in which we're enabling networks and mobilising providers. So certainly our Pacific Practitioners Whānau, which started about 18 months ago now and is spearheaded around the country. A lot of practitioners coming together to mobilise, to share, to look at how they can sustain from a workforce perspective and really start to engage much more widely and as I say, to really support that development. We must, when we are thinking about equity of access and equity of outcome, we have to look at ensuring we have, I believe, portions of our funding going dedicated into kaupapa Māori services, supports and approaches, and also for Pacifica and other ethnic groups as well. In our action plan, we have really called out the experiences and voices of a range of different groups, both cultural, but also other identified groups such as disabled people, rainbow communities, etc. And when you start to look at those diverse needs, we need diverse responses. And so in terms of some of the work we're doing around that capability build, we're not just looking at our frameworks, we're actually starting to say, what are the career pathways and pipelines for people coming into our sector? How are we going to sustain and ensure that training is happening, not just on the job, but right back when people are coming into this work, and ensuring that we have a real eye to capacity building as well. We know that quite often, particularly our Māori practitioners, often are holding the lion's share of the work and the burden of working with whānau. And so we need to be able to continue to grow not only the capability but the capacity, and making sure we're attracting people into this sector for work. Obviously, we work closely with Te Pukotahitanga, which is our minister's Māori advisory group. They have a key focus on workforce capability development, and I know there've been a number of surveys that have happened last year to start to really understand what that future direction needs to be for the workforce. So a lot more to be done. We need to do it together, and we need to find, ways of really supporting and sustaining our workforces.
It also, Emma, earlier you touched on the need to work at a multi-level, take a multi-level approach in this work. And so a lot of the things that we focused on in this discussion so far that have come through from Mokopuna have been more at that, I guess, sort of grassroots, practical level. But the last thing that we want to bring forward is this theme around systemic issues, which Mokopuna had a lot to tell us about. And I guess here what we see is the importance of interconnection across these different systems and sectors, and just how important it is from a Mokopuna perspective that these sectors are all working in optimized ways, as well as working together with Mokopuna and whānau really at the centre. So I'll share a few quotes relating now to different sectors, just briefly. For example, the importance of the role of oranga-tamariki here. So several Mokopuna highlighted concerns about the impact of oranga-tamariki interventions, including experiences of instability and lack of support. And so this Mokopuna told us, then I was placed in foster care with my older sister. That only lasted about 3 months before psychiatrists split us up, and pretty much they wanted to find a family for me that was trauma-informed, so they knew about trauma. I was placed with my Home for Life family, but they were not trauma-informed at all. Mokopuna have also talked to us about their experiences in the justice system, expressing a lot of frustrations about the court system, about their engagement with police, and feeling let down by those systems, and also highlight the importance of our mental health system. And this person says, this Mokopuna says, I don't know anyone that says the mental health system is good. Everyone I know says it is bad. So Mokopuna have really expressed strongly the need for timely and accessible mental health services that are tailored to address trauma and support healing, and many identified those long wait times and barriers to access as really negatively impacting on their healing journey.
That's right. And something that we really focused on here at Puna Aonui business unit is to start to move from identifying what the systemic barriers are to working with partners to really start to validate and understand and unpack those system barriers. You've spoken about a number of those things. Taken together, they're very profound. I think sometimes we expect our frontline providers and NGOs to almost walk on water and create a set of outcomes, but they're operating within an inherently broken system.
Yes.
And so we need to keep, I talk a lot about investing in commissioning out here. We have to look at our own backyard in terms of the way in which the system is geared. And so at Puna Aonui Business Unit, we're doing some work now to what we are terming sort of solution design. So we're working with some partners from across the sector to identify and really shine a spotlight on some of these core barriers, and then working through a process with which we are looking at what those solutions might need to be. Now, those may be operational policy changes. They may be some additional training and development support for some of our agencies. It may be a piece of legislation that needs to change. It also may be a shift in design of how some things are working. So we are really looking to take that forward to action. It's one thing to collect and to hear about the challenges and problems, but we actually have to move those insights into action. And I think, again, reports like this and the fact that you at Mana Mokopuna have been able to go out safely, and that's so key, and gather these voices and these insights, we have to then be able to take those through to actionable change. And then you've got to close the loop and tell people what you did.
That's right.
And so that is part of this process that it's sort of early days with this, but it is something that we have had to really working to do to get that all up and running.
Yeah, and I think what comes through so strongly, Emma, in this report from Mokopuna is that they do want to see action, and that springboards off and it builds on their calls to action.
Yeah.
And it is really excellent to be able to see how some of those calls to action have been picked up in the Te Aotearoa second action plan. Sure, as you acknowledge yourself, there's more that we can and must be doing. And I guess that's where our role at Mana Mokopuna as the independent advocate comes in to continue to amplify these calls to action, which we will continue to do. It's looking for these things across the systemic level. And so if I was to summarise, I guess what we've heard from Mokopuna, they want to see funding models prioritising Mokopuna and whānau needs. They want to have better accountability in our oranga tamariki system. They want to have the safety of Mokopuna prioritised during police encounters, and they want an adequately resourced mental health system that meets their needs in timely and accessible ways. And as well, across the piece, that we more actively listen to Mokopuna and really value and hear their views to meaningfully shape decisions and outcomes that affect them. Yeah. So look, those are the things that we wanted to draw to your attention from this Mokopuna Voices report. I encourage you to read the whole report though, and also to read alongside it the second Te Aotearoa Action Plan. We do have a little bit of time for some pātai, and I do want to remind you that for anyone who does need to leave bang on 11:30, this recording will be shared out to you as well. So look, the first question that we have that has come through is around, will there be funding for counselling for Mokopuna for violence? Currently, there is no funding for ongoing need. So that's something that is really important, and I want to acknowledge some of the reductions in services and funding that we have seen across the oranga tamariki space over the past year. And in my role, I continue to advocate for Mokopuna to be at the centre of any of those funding decisions. But Emma, how does that counselling for Mokopuna fit sort of at
So the way that we sort of set up is that currently the funding for particular services is the remit of those individual agencies. And so in this regard, we're probably talking about ACC, OT, and a bit of MSD. I know there is some funding and support available through Ministry of Justice, particularly for those women and children who are at the point of having a protection order issued, and then they can access future services as well for all of those people. What we need to start to do, so I can't sit here and say what funding decisions individual agencies will make, but I can assure that we are working to put those decisions on the table among all agencies across the board to start to make those decisions together. I think we can all agree that when we do this separately, we have unintended consequences. And so ensuring that we are bringing those things to the table and making a really clear forward plan about where the investment needs to go, and understanding not just at a national level, but I keep talking about how does that play out locally. And you will see in some areas they may be sort of well served. In other areas we have real disparity of needs and access to service as well. So we need to start looking geographically, as well as the diversity of the different services and supports that are available right across the country.
Yeah, and from a children's rights approach and from an equity perspective, it's so important that we do as much as possible drive towards that consistency, so that Mokopuna and whānau in different localities, whether that's urban, rural, small town, large town, wherever it is around the motu, that they do have that consistency and equity of experience.
That's right. That's right.
Another really, thank you everyone for the questions that you're bringing through. Another question that has come through, this person says, the comment about commissioning has me wondering if the Social Investment Agency is engaged with Te Puna Aonui and part of these conversations, and how can we ensure that the Social Investment Agency's approach isn't overly prescriptive, allows for flexibility and responsiveness to the needs of Mokopuna and their whānau?
Yeah. So, absolutely. So I can genuinely say we are very closely aligned. We've been working significantly over the last year, both in the development of the action plan, but also in understanding the models that Social Investment Agency are starting to utilise. They've got some standards around what evaluation can look like. They've got principles around social investment. I've wanted to ensure that our work is front of the queue when it comes to adopting social investment approaches. We have to tread and step carefully through that. I hear you. When sometimes we can think of that as being constraining, and the idea that only some people can deliver and others won't. I think we need to take a much more holistic view of our sector and our investment across that. But we do need to dial up things that tell us what works and what good looks like. Now, we also have to be really conscious of how we evaluate what works. One size fits all is not going to work here. We've already heard through the report, some of that range of needs at different times for Mokopuna and their whānau doesn't happen through sort of, as I've talked about before, very discrete services that are, measurable, at times. And so we absolutely have to understand all of that together. I think social investment is going, and you've got to pair that with commissioning for outcomes. If we get that right, I think there will be greater flexibility, actually. And I think there will be a greater opening for how providers can come together collectively to deliver outcomes in a way that works for them, where we are not overly prescriptive as to how that happens.
Yeah. Thanks, Emma. This person's asking the Pātai, collective agency action has been attempted and invested in previously, like the social sector trials. What are the relevant lessons from these initiatives that can help improve collective action for Mokopuna and their whānau? Maybe if I can briefly kick off, I guess we see that from time to time we have these pilots, and then it's like they get stopped, there's a change of government. I think from a Mokopuna perspective, we really need to ensure that when we commit to something, that we can make that as enduring as possible. And so that's why I'm always advocating to our parliamentarians to work across the aisle, work in cross-party ways to build consensus around issues that relate to Mokopuna and Te Whānau, so that we can have some enduring underpinning ways of working. And I think that's quite important in this space. One thing that I think we've seen in some of these previous initiatives that have helped improve that collective action is genuine listening to Mokopuna, to whānau, to the voice of lived experience, and then actually ensuring that that shapes change in practice, and that we loop back to people to hear how's that actually going, how's that tracking. So that would be my favourite.
Yeah, and I think that there's been some incredible work done. We've had place-based approaches, social sector trials, all of this accumulation of knowledge and learning. What we are taking here at Te Puna Aonui from a lot of that is collaboration is tough, we know that, but you can really enable collaboration locally through really clear governance and leadership, and putting that in the hands of the community and iwi. We also know that we need to join up in terms of the resources, the services, and that those foundational pieces that local collaborations have to support. You have to create learning systems, and so that you can have those loops of feedback coming back in. We have to be able to share information and support that. And as I've said before, we need these approaches to be operating in concert with core services. So if you can't get some of the core services right, whānau will always bang up against challenges within the system. So we need to be able to create those connections. And there are some enduring approaches like Manaaki Tairāwhiti and the South Auckland Social Wellbeing Board, who have really taken, continue to evolve and mature. We've been able to support where we can in terms of system learning, system coaches through some of that. But you really got to be able to stay the course to that audience member's point, but also to be able to learn and have that continuous learning happening all the time.
This person's asking, when I use the word mokopuna, what age group am I referring to in this presentation? Great pata, and sorry that I didn't maybe make that clear enough at the start, but we are referring to young people, children and young people under the age of 25. And so in this project, we interviewed and heard from a whole range age group wise of mokopuna. I think the youngest was around 9, and then the eldest was up to 24, 25. And then this partai is asking us, Emma, would the interagency sharing of information platform be subjected to police and court precedent?
That's possibly a level of detail that I'm not in a position to answer just yet. I hear the concern though, and through the question. And so currently we have a tool that's being used largely led by police, which is our family safety system. It's used in about 25 different sites. We are looking to replace and enhance and to build from there. We will be working closely right across the government architecture and within all of those confines for that. So we will certainly be traversing those issues. One of the key things about our work here is we're just sort of starting to get going and working through business cases, etc. Is to be really transparent about the work that we are doing and sharing that. And so you can expect to see more from us when it comes to our information sharing work.
Yeah, thanks. Hey everyone, we are running up to 11:30 and we really want to respect your time. We acknowledge there are a few questions that we haven't got to, so Emma and I are committed to working through and answering those and making sure that we get some answers out to you, probably alongside the recording when we share that out. But just one last parta here that we will take. Someone is asking, did anything Mokopuna say surprise you? Emma, was there anything that jumped out as a...
There wasn't anything specific. The thing, when I sat down and read the report, I think I got up from my desk and just stormed around for a little bit. Kind of just went, it is so abundantly clear and simple. And as they're not simplistic, but it's simple, and why we continue to make it hard. And that just gave me a real fuel. So it was just the clarity and simplicity of what they were saying they wanted and needed, and why we make it so darn hard to provide that. Yeah.
And my answer to this part is, it connects to what you shared, Emma. I guess something that surprised me a little bit was the real clarity of vision that Mokopuna shared with us around what their ideal service could look like. And I think that's quite a nice anchor quote to share with everyone as we start to round out here. And so you can find on page 65 of the report, you can see some beautiful illustrations, and these go alongside the vision that some of the Mokopuna shared for us for some of the services that they would like to have. And so we will just quote to you now what this Mokopuna, who we've called Rongo, shared about their vision for the service that they'd like to see.
So what I would do if I was the Prime Minister, I would make houses that children can go to anytime to talk peacefully, to talk from their heart to their parents that have been traumatising him or her. So I'd make these like these little buildings in all the rohi, everywhere in Aotearoa. And the rules are, if the parents don't agree to what the children have to say, and they're like about to get angry at them, just leave straight away. The children will leave straight away. That's a safe place for children to speak from their hearts and to speak the truth. So they don't hold their mamai, their hurt, their anger, their sadness inside them. So they let it out, and the adults have to listen.
And then this Mokopuna goes on and shares, so there would be toys, there would be books if they want to read while they're listening, and there'd be fidgety stuff, there'd be food, there'd be water. It will basically be like a little house, like a little cabin. Everything, though, is in there. Beanbags, a table, chairs, but there's this one little area in the room where it's the place where they meet, where they have the kōrero, where they speak like this from the heart. So they would have however they like to speak, however long. It can take a whole day if they want to, just depends on the wairua, and they don't have to pay. They can go for free because this isn't paying stuff. This is for help. So they all come here for free. There'll be toys, there'll be books, there'll be teddy bears if they want to squeeze one while they're talking, and there'll be pictures up on the walls. I really want to thank everyone for making the time to join this conversation today. Emma, I wonder, are there some key takeaways that you just want to highlight before we round out?
I just want to really put a call out to all of those people who are watching and participating today, which is, you've heard me talk about the simplicity. It will take all of us, and we have to also, in the way that we've given rise to and amplified Mokopuna voices today, we need to keep being able to do that. We need to be able to keep bringing our insights and experiences to the fore. I want to ensure that we have sort of the system support to enable each and every one of us to do the job we came to do. A lot of that is not all of the complexity and all of the challenge that comes with bureaucracy and all of those things. We came to, change lives. And I think, this has just really given me real inspiration for how we do that. I'm excited about particularly the next 2 years under our next action plan to make some real progress. There are some good ingredients there to really make some change. We have to be really conscious of unintended consequences through that. And that requires us to, I think, work alongside one another and work in a sense of trust.
Ngā mihi, Emma. I guess to add to that, my closing whakaaro are just simply that, just like Mokopuna are taonga, their voices that they have shared with us are taonga too. So thank you for being part of this with us today. I ask that you keep in touch with our My World team, who are the team at Mana Mokopuna who undertook this special project working at Te Puna Aonui. You can get in touch with our team at any time via voices@manamokopuna.org.nz. Ed will pop that email in the chat for you. Please feel free to get in touch. We would love to hear from you. And I also ask that, given that you made the time to come to this kōrero today, please do your part, play your part to amplify the voices of these mokopuna. They are so important. So I ask that you take the time to share this report with at least one other person in your professional network, in your family, in your whānau, in your community or hapori. Share it, amplify it. That is how we can support some of that collective change that we have spoken about today. So just like we started, I will now close our space. Thanks again for being here. Thank you, Emma. It's been a real pleasure, and we will get the recording out to everyone and also follow up on those partai that we didn't have a chance to answer today. Me karakia tātou. Unuhia, unuhia. Unuhia ki te uru tapunumi. Kia wātea, kia mama, te tēnana, te wairua, ki te aratakatū. Ko ia rā e rongo, whakeiria ake ki runga, kia whakamoa, kia tēnā, haumie, huie, thank you. Ka ki te koutou.